year. Customer clientele. I was broke, that was last year. Getting money like cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Benjamin, nothing less. I was broke, that was last year. Don't change 'em. I never switched up. Been down since day one. Stay social. People change 'em. I never switched up. Social currency.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Dope Black Thoughts Live. My name's Kevin Cox.
Well, I normally start, but anyway, my name is Marcus Ivy.
You're on the ones and twos though.
I'm Marcus Ivy.
One day we are going to get it together. I'm Stefania.
And of course, I'm Hashim Coates, also known as Hashade.
Mike Carter, aka the Paperboy. Hello.
And tonight's special guest we have is our own Attorney General Phil Weiser. Please welcome Phil to the show.
Great to be with you guys.
Oh, thank you.
So just once again, just honored to have you on the show. And you've been in office for 2 years now, is that right?
That's right.
It's kind of flown by, is what it feels like. So,
well, except the last year feels like 10 years, but other than that, yes, it's flown by.
Fair enough. Exactly. I know there's a lot going on. So I'm gonna just toss out a softball real quickly and just kind of tell us what's the most pressing things that's going on right now at the AG's office.
All right, I'm going to go deep and philosophical. We are defending the rule of law, and we are doing our best to be stewards of the proposition that we can have equal justice under the law and that people can trust their government and their legal systems, because the level of distrust, the level of challenges to the rule of law, it is such that I would say we are living in a very fragile time. And we're not even a month out of January 6th. I saw Hashim's post about that, which was deeply meaningful. So we can't take for granted these basic foundations. And the people in our office, our number one calling is advancing the rule of law. Our second, protecting democracy. We did a lot of that this fall. Our third, and this is something else we'll talk a lot about, promoting justice.
Perfect. So I just wanted to give the folks, the panel, kind of an opportunity to kind of talk. I'm going to be monitoring the Facebook questions and so forth. So I was going to turn it over to Mr. Mike Carter, the paper boy, as he calls himself. And he's another attorney. Don't you dare. Come on, Mike. I know you got some questions.
No. First of all, thank you. I think we were having a conversation about who knows you the best. I lost. So how you doing, sir?
We'll work on that, Mike. We got work to do.
And one of the things you kind of a couple of questions I had, you kind of started out talking about, the rule of law and just having so many. There's only one rule of law. There should only be one rule of law, but we have people who feel mistreated by that rule of law. And one of the things I was thinking about, I live out here in Aurora, and I have on one side of me, on one side of the neighborhood, there's literally a Gadsden flag, and on literally across the street from that individual is a Black Lives Matter flag. And when you're in the AG's office, how are you dealing with, there's literally a complete distrust of the laws do not apply to everyone equally?
It's the question, Mike. It's the question. We have to do our best to be faithful to that principle, which I believe it's at the Supreme Court. They have that as their true north, equal justice under law. And the problem, for lots of reasons, is we don't achieve that ideal. Our systems, the people in it, are far from perfect. They're far from unbiased. They're far from omniscient. And so whether it's mistakes or whether it's people abusing a position, we aren't at where I would like us to be. And then, unfortunately, we also have a crisis of legitimacy. And let me add this point to it, which is where people won't agree on some basic facts. It gets really hard to have a system that operates by evidence and the rule of law. And I'll go over a exhibit in this sort of challenge, which is we had litigation after the election. In Georgia, 15 cases. In Pennsylvania, a whole bunch of cases. And there was not a shred of voter fraud that was shown. But there are people who might say, I still insist that there's fraud, and I will doubt the legal system because it didn't give me the results that I believed. And so that's sort of on one side. And then, as you also know, there are other people who may say, we looked at the statistics about who gets pulled over by cops or who gets expelled from school. And the rules, while in principle should apply equally to everybody, we're looking at what's happening and we're not seeing that. And so you hear then concerns about whether the system is working. And let me add one more, since we're getting really real here, one more big challenge is the role of money in politics and people who have lots of money, and under Citizens United, they can pour it, through these corporations. Does that mean that people with money end up getting listened to more and have more influence? And when you look at policies, you sometimes wonder who's advocating for the people without money. And I'll give you an example on that one. We have a system right now that if you're arrested for whatever reason and you have money, you're gonna get out on a bail bond. But if you don't have money, our system is set up right now, you're gonna stay in, whether or not you're a risk to do anything that would potentially hurt anybody. We've got to fix that. And so part of what's on me is to be committed to fairness, be committed to equal justice under law, be committed to representing everybody, rich and poor, at a time when a lot of people who are looking at our justice system have all sorts of doubts. Does that answer your question, Mike? It's a really good question.
Well, and just to follow up briefly, like I said, I live out here in Aurora, and not to throw stones at the Aurora Police Department. However, what is your position on the AG's office doing officer-involved shooting investigations and taking them out of the district attorney's office, taking them out of the local police department?
So before I answer that question, let me start with a important point. Last year, we got a new authority that I was all for, giving our office the ability to investigate patterns and practice of civil rights violations. Because it's an ongoing investigation, I can't really talk about it, but we are investigating the city of Aurora on this point. And so I believe this authority is really important. Investigating officer-involved shootings with an eye to whether officers committed criminal acts involves a whole set of other challenges that right now our office is not set up to do. So it would be a really big change. I don't know if anyone in the legislature is pushing for that. I am not pushing for that right now. What I am working to do is to use this pattern and practice authority, which I see as deeply meaningful, exists on the federal level, but until last year, as part of this Senate Bill 217, we didn't have it in our office. I believe that is a powerful and important function, and I'm fighting to get more money so we can really do good work with it.
And so if I may, got a couple questions in the chat, Facebook Live chat, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Hashim. But so a couple questions. How will you remove structural racism and systematic racism during your first term? That was by Steve Douglas. Yeah. I'm gonna hit you with the second one. Eric Brinson, what is the status of the Elijah McClain grand jury? So quick, I know they're not quick issues, but I wanted to give you a quick chance to hit those up, and then, then we'll turn it over to Hashim.
Let me start with Everett, who I adore. It's ongoing, and as an ongoing matter, all I can say is that. That's the second question from Everett about the grand jury. What I can say on the first one is a very meaningful one. Systematic racism, structural racism, implicit biases pervade institutions in our society. So I'll answer the question broadly, but I think the specific question was, what am I going to do about it in terms of our immediate sphere of influence? But I want to actually say, I want diversity, equity, and inclusion to be top of mind in everything I do. And that's probably the short answer, but I want to go a little longer than that. I appointed the first ever Deputy Attorney General for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Mhm.
And her name is Maritza Dominguez Braswell. We in our office are committed to the proposition that if we can support everyone to be their best authentic self and not intimidated, not afraid to show up as themselves, if you're transgender, if you're Black, if you're Mormon, whatever your background is, if you can be true to yourself, honest about yourself, we believe you're going to help us better serve the people of Colorado. And we believe we're going to be a better place to work. And we recognize that there is a legacy of treating people differently, notably based on race, based on gender, based on gender identity, sexual orientation, a lot of different reasons that have kept us from achieving the goal of giving people equal opportunity to succeed. And that's not just in employment. We talked about criminal justice, mentioned about education, that's in healthcare. And so that's a lot of work to do. And I think the critical is keep it top of mind as we confront situations, that we remember to be thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion. So this week, as we're thinking about how we talk about Black History Month in our office, one of the things that one of our team members talked about and suggested is, hey, we should be talking about health equity issues. And let me talk about the pandemic, because this is the sort of painful twofer. More African Americans, more Latinas, more Latinos, more Native Americans are dying during the pandemic. The rate of vaccination in those communities is less than white people. Those are facts. And so we start from the facts. We got to start from the facts. There may be different explanations behind it, but none of them are actually, from a moral standpoint, justify that situation. Whatever the explanations are, you need to understand what's getting in the way of equity. And so it's going to be something we're going to keep top of mind. It's going to be constant work. And as we approach all these sorts of policy issues, we've got to keep it on the mind. Now, I'll mention one more thing too. Part of diversity, equity, inclusion is we're building a diverse team. So when you look at our leadership team, you'll see African Americans, you'll see Asian Americans, you'll see women, you'll see gays, lesbians in leadership positions. And we're working hard not just to be diverse, because you can be diverse by having people from different backgrounds, but to be inclusive. So people feel included, they feel comfortable showing up as their authentic selves.
Awesome. Gene.
All right. All right, cool. So Phil, thank you for joining us today. So you talked about a topic, we just got off a topic that I always talk about, and I even get exhausted at talking about it, and that is with racism and working to end it. Understanding how it works and how it's woven into everything. I guess I have a couple of questions for you. One, and sometimes it's hard for us to critique ourselves. What do you feel that you could be doing more or better at pushing towards that fight for the eradication of racism from your office, and then also far as being supportive as it relates to things that people can bring to the AG's office, but then also thinking about Senate Bill 217 that we talked about that passed last year. It was a step of many, many steps to go. I think that a better way, or the next step, should be, as is also hinted on, investigating the DA's office. And with the qualified immunity that the district attorneys have when it comes to railroading, being a victim of railroading of a DA's office, how does one go about, or what are your thoughts on having that removed to make criminal justice reform actually something that is reformed and not just lip service?
All right, there's a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Let me start with the first point.
I had to get it in while I could.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. The first point I would say is, I think I can be doing better making sure I'm spending time listening to and engage with communities of color of different ages. So part of the point about money is The people who can hire lobbyists tend to get heard. I'm always pushing my team myself. I want to be hearing the people who don't have a lobbyist. I want to go to them. And I think we can do better on that. I remember going to black churches when I was running, and people said, you know, it's good you're here as a candidate. It'd be a lot better if you were here as Attorney General. And I made a commitment to keep going back. And that's what I'll be doing, including this Sunday. But doing it in a way there's more room for listening and dialogue. So I've had some of that with younger people of color, particularly Project Voice, which is a fabulous program to do that. But I to do your point, Hashim, I should be doing more of that. That's important. And listening to learn from people. And I will tell you, on issues like the school to prison pipeline, on issues around mental health, I learn a lot by showing up and listening to what teenagers have to say. And that's an important voice. And I should be doing more of that. So I think that's part of it. And part of it is, your point is also really important. I probably can do better about talking about race more. So I'm comfortable talking about race and acknowledging racism, in part because since I was in college, I had good friends who are African Americans and mentors who talked to me in a real way about their lived experience. And part of the challenge we have, back to that last really good question about structural racism, is we have to talk about the statistics, whether it's during this virus, whether it's expulsions from school or criminal prosecution for disciplinary issues, whatever the issues are, we have to be able to talk about them. But we need to tell the stories and elicit the stories of what people experience. So Michelle Obama had never talked about her high school experience, which not a lot of African Americans and Latinos have had, where they talked to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor said, you're not, fill in the blank, college material. You're not Ivy League material. You're not what? That you're not, that is dream killing talk. Mm-hmm. And it comes more often to people of color. And Michelle Obama had never said that story, but she told it in her autobiography. And the claim was, you're not Princeton material. And she went to Princeton. And then she went to Harvard Law School. So we've got to be better about talking about it. And I know it's exhausting, Hashim, and thank you for being willing to talk about race. We need to be talking about it. We need to hear it. What to do about prosecutors? I would say I am probably not there in terms of repealing. It's actually not qualified immunity. Okay. And Marcus can correct me. It's a stronger form of immunity than that as prosecutors. But I think we have an issue to be thinking about, because the people who are police, who are judges, who are prosecutors, all exercise a lot of power. And the question that you're getting at is, what is the oversight of the exercise of power? Now, the ultimate oversight is, who do you elect as a DA? So that's one piece of it. And we should be thinking about what other forms of oversight. You are right, Hashim. We have, in the policing world, developed different forms of oversight, including the Peace Officer Standards and Training Program in my office, which just recently decertified some police officers for lying. I'm looking at this issue. I don't think the answer is repealing the immunity, but I'm looking at it to figure out what are ways to address concerns that prosecutors are abusing that power. I also think we have to all be honest about, the issues are concerned that judges abuse their power. And what I say about in the police realm, it's probably true in all three realms, which is, it's about who do you recruit to do the job. It's about how you train the person to do the job the right way. It's about accountability. When people abuse the trust, what are the consequences?
Yeah. So I agree, and I give pushback. Well, I agree that it responds to that we need to be sure who we hire or elect for a district attorney. But there's something about having that type of immunity when you can just go through and you can pull things out of a truth statement, out of a factually true statement, and snatch out what would qualify as constituting or creating a crime or a violation to the law, and then charge someone that walked into a system as a victim and flip them around to becoming a defendant. And then I also feel, and I haven't gone to law school, I want to, it's on my list, but I also feel that overcharging happens to be cruel and unusual punishment. The stress and things that go along with seeing a list of 15 charges and then you're being forced to a plea deal, like, it gets so convoluted that in layman's eyes or layperson's eyes, that it's like, wow, the system is rigged. I can't win.
Let me say a few things about this. And my goal of the year is about leading with empathy. And to that end, we in our office did something I don't know if any AG's done before. I went to the prison. This is obviously pre-COVID in Sterling. And I had a town hall with the inmates who were there to hear from them and their lived experience. And part of what all prosecutors, and ours is sort of white collar in our office, we're doing like environmental crimes, Medicaid fraud, financial fraud. When you're prosecuting people, that means you have a lot of power. You are making discretionary decisions that will affect people's lives. You are engaging with them at a time of great trauma in their lives. And if you don't have empathy, both for defendants and for victims, if you remove yourself, I don't believe you're going to be able to do that job well. And so one of the questions to think about, both on the recruitment, whether it's candidates or individual line prosecutors, the training, is how are you both looking for and developing professionals with empathy? Because if you are heartless as a prosecutor and you aren't listening and you aren't caring, then I don't know that you can do your job fairly. And that leads back to, again, the first question that Mike asked, which is why do people feel a lack of trust? It's often because their interactions with a legal system leave them feeling that they're being mistreated. They're not being listened to.
Yeah, got you. And thank you. I'm done with it. Maybe something that the DAs and even you can think about is hiring attorneys that maybe have had some blemishes on their criminal record.
There's all sorts of ideas, Hashim, and we should keep the conversation going, which is also having people get to know people who've been in justice involved. Yeah. And I'll mention now, because it's important that I say this, we're going to be working on a re-entry initiative. And that is a real priority because a lot of people end up serving a sentence for all sorts of reasons. And then if you can't find an opportunity on the other side, you are often going to find yourself back inside again. And 50% of people who leave prison are back in within 3 years. Yep. Now, by the way, as many of you guys know, if you find your way to a place like the Second Chance Center, right, that number is 10%. And so that says something. We can do a whole lot better than we're doing by treating people fairly with empathy. And then part of this, and this is where I can lean in, is getting employers to say, I need to maybe re-examine my stigma, my prejudgment about what it would mean to hire somebody who served a sentence, and to have more empathy, open minds. And there have been efforts in other cities that have done this that have been really powerful. So we're working on this here. Stay tuned.
All right. That's great to hear. Let's pass it over to Stefania.
Okay. Well, I think everything that you said was really interesting. I would want to see a little bit more words into action, especially just piggybacking off of you, Hashim, where we're talking about the prosecutors. And I mean, we know that everyone operates with a bit of bias and giving them so much discretion. And you mentioned on the back end having consequences when we know that there's been a bias that's been that they're operating through. I would really like to see something happen, pen on paper, words into action there, because I mean, with the SB 217, that's national. Everyone's looking at Colorado on that with that model, and I think that's fabulous. So I'd like to see a little bit more action on that at the back end of the prosecutors. I'm going to go national. We've been local, talking about some local items here, and I'm going to go national because there's certain things that are trending in the news. So I want to talk about Ms. Green and everything that's happened today. She did, so we just had her the vote, and they did rule to, they agreed to take her off the committees. She is so vocal about her hatred and what she stands for. And I know you don't speak for the entire Jewish community. But my question is, why is the Jewish community so quiet right now when she's so vocal against them?
Well, I mean, I need to look at like what the Anti-Defamation League has said.
Mhm.
I don't have this. Someone can Google this. They are pretty good about calling out hateful and just sort of dangerous rhetoric. So I don't know if they have or haven't about her. I'll be honest, Stefani, I try to tune her out. I find that to be like a energy suck. It just gets me upset. I recognize how much attention she gets. I worry about the state of our democratic republic because she's taken up a lot of oxygen, and it's scary to me to have leading attention on people who don't seem to have any real interest in solving problems. We could talk about Mitt Romney and his views on topics that might be different than mine and how I believe he might be wrong about something, but I wouldn't say he's not trying to make public policy that he thinks is the best. I don't know that we have any evidence that she's actually engaging in public policy as opposed to conspiracy theories and, like you said, dangerous rhetoric.
Not yet. Taking away her power to do that. So
the good news was Congress has shown accountability and say there are consequences for lies and for dangerous actions. And what I do think is important is that we find a way to reset things in Congress, because too much of Congress is getting on this direction of, hey, look at me, pay attention to me, and too little is, hey, let's work together to find a solution to this problem. And it's hard to know exactly where that started. I mean, you can talk about Newt Gingrich in the 1990s. You can talk about Ted Cruz's filibuster in 2013. Obviously, what Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley tried to do on January 6th with the election results. We've got a lot of things in Congress which are grandstanding, which is about drawing attention to yourself by saying outrageous things. We need a lot more problem solving.
I don't think she's just saying this. I think that she really believes them. And so I'll give you a little pushback. I think that being quiet is something that's afforded to somebody like me, who has no power, who is part of, the middle class. I have no seats. I don't sit on any committees. Someone like you, I don't think should be quiet. That's not something that's afforded to you, because you took a political role. You took a role that's out there in the public and in our view. So while I can say, I choose not to listen to it, that's something that you should be very vocal about, because her hatred is a cancer. And the more she talks, the more other people may start believing her. I mean, we've seen this happening with Trump for the last 4 years. So when she continues to say things that are so out there, and she has mentioned the Jewish community over and over and over again, I'm just wondering why there hasn't been more voices from the Jewish community joining with, the Black community and saying, we're not going to have it anymore. We're done. There seems to be the Republican Party who's afraid to do what they're supposed to do regarding, taking care of hatred with people in positions of power. There should be no way that our tax dollars are going to pay her salary when she believes that most of us don't exist or are evil or, demonic or whatever she believes.
I'll need to look more at what she said and what I can say about it. I do think there is a need to do something about the state of the overall discourse, because I don't know that she is the problem per se. It's the problem that there's a market or there are rewards for saying the things she says.
Yeah. You know what? Should I call you Mr. Weiser?
Phil, come on.
I had that same issue.
I'm sitting here listening to Stefania, Sister Gallegos talk about Miss Green, but the reality is we have our own homegrown individual that actually comes underneath your umbrella as the AG. I understand Sister Gallegos kind of questioning Miss Green as a member of Congress. I want to question Ms. Boebert as a fellow Coloradan.
I have spoken about her.
She represents us as members of Colorado. You as the AG, are you? I know something just came out about her and whether or not she has actually used campaign funds. What are we doing? First, for the discourse. We shouldn't be sitting here trying to set each other on fire. Second, if she's out here spreading this nonsense, what are we doing, or what are you doing as the AG?
Few different answers. I'm trying on the discourse to be focused on the substance, not on the personality. Part of the problem is there's a market for, call it a cult of personality or a style. And I think it is dangerous because you're in there to get attention like you're on a reality TV show, not like you're actually doing the people's business. So I do think that is a responsibility everyone in public life needs to be thinking about, which is how are you showing up? Are you real? Or are you really solving problems? Or are you trying to build your own brand? With respect to legal issues, I don't know if there are any violations that would fall within my oversight. We will be open to suggestions that there are. There have been things just raised that I believe have been referred to different levels, federal levels of oversight. And I believe that we need those processes to go forward, whoever you are. And then how do we address our situation in the 3rd Congressional District? Ultimately, we've got to win elections. We've got to win elections by having the right candidates with the right campaigns and the right message. And in 2022, someone asked the question, I'll mention it. I'll be on the ballot with a number of other Democrats, and it's on me to put together the right campaign, to engage communities with the right message, and to do something about our discourse.
Nice. But if you guys are actually sitting on space lasers,
Right?
can we talk about the misuse?
Okay, just
I have some suggestions.
For those who never saw the History of the World Part 1 by Mel Brooks,
Yes.
there's a Jews in space segment at the end.
Right.
Got a lot of memes on Twitter out of that one.
Yes.
So
Okay.
you brought up Twitter, which is a massive platform, and I want to, for people that don't know, Phil, you were a co-author on a book in 2018 on antitrust and whatnot. So that brings me to Google, because it looks like you're joining into this lawsuit about antitrust. So kind of break down a little bit of what antitrust is and what we're doing. Are we joining in with the Department of Justice case, or is it going to remain separate, and what that looks like?
Guys, I love the breadth of topics in jumping from Jews in space to antitrust.
You never know what's going to happen on this show.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
Keep you on your toes.
Yes.
I love it. Bring it. So this is also, as you picked up, near and dear to my heart. Colorado and Nebraska, not always the couple you'd associate, together are leading the state's investigation to Google. And people can do their homework at home, particularly those like Hashim who are going to law school someday. You can read both complaints, the federal DOJ complaint or the state AG multi-state complaint. I like ours better. Hopefully we're going to get them to come on board. We've got some more claims and concerns. The big claim and concern we have is what's going to happen in the future. Google got this monopoly in search by having a better product than Alta Vista. Few of us here remember Alta Vista. And so, exactly. So Google got this monopoly in search. They then built a monopoly in search advertising. What they've done over the last several years is abuse their monopoly by doing things that are not fair competition on the merits, but they're about undermining a rival's ability to compete. we're now looking at a new generation of search. You're going to have search in your cars, search in your home, smart devices. Google is doing everything it can to lock down that new frontier and to prevent competition. That is the opposite of the American way. The American way is to have competition, let the best product win. Google is using anti-competitive tactics to deprive consumers of choice, to hurt innovation, and to maintain dominance in this really important area, searching for information. And there's a lot at stake there, including whether or not we have ability to have our information stay private, because Google obviously uses a lot of our information, whereas you go to a rival system, it might say we'll be more privacy friendly. So we are pursuing this lawsuit. It's independent of the DOJ. I would say superior to the one the DOJ is doing, the Federal Department of Justice. We will work with them, of course, because we're both going after the same sort of relief, which is how do we restore competition and protect consumers in this market?
That's more than I needed right there. That's really good. Because the word antitrust comes up and I'm straight over the head. But when you talk about a monopoly and eliminating competition, I think all of our conservative friends are a fan of competition in the marketplace and whatnot.
Well, that's what's good about this. It's a really important point. Left, right, Democratic, Republican, you see a monopoly like Google squelching competition. You're like, I don't like that. That's not right. That's not fair. This issue has united AGs, state AGs, me and the Nebraska AG, who's a Republican. He and I become friends. 38 of us are in this together. And they set the trial date for September 2023. So I've got to win my reelection to be around to pursue this trial.
Yeah, really.
Well, okay, so I want to switch it real quick because we've mentioned January 6th, and I want to come back because I didn't get a chance to jump in. I know you are, but in what ways are you cooperating with our intelligence apparatus to try to weed out some of these people that have created this heinous attack on our Capitol? And also, how far will your tendrils reach into our municipalities, such as Aurora PD, if they're not doing inquiries? Will you be willing to do inquiries for us, et cetera?
And before you answer, let me just throw it in because we had some Aurora council members on last week, and they kind of talked about that. Then there was some robust discussion in the chat about whether Aurora can make inquiry, at least the police department. So that's just a little background of what we were told last week.
So this was an important bipartisan action because after January 6th happened, I believed we needed a strong statement that was bipartisan about an attack on our democracy itself. And I think Officer Sitnik is still in the Capitol right now, being honored for his bravery, dying, protecting members of Congress. And I heard Jason Crow talk about it. We just heard Representative Tasia Cortez talk about it. There was a lot of members of Congress who thought this might be the end for them. And so the trauma they endured while doing their constitutional responsibility, that is a awful thing that happened. And everyone who perpetrated those crimes, who engaged in destruction, who hurt others, need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And so we wrote that letter. We got 46 out of 50 states on board.
Nice.
Making a powerful statement. And this is an interesting situation. It gets back to social media. The investigations have been aided by the fact that so many of the criminals and rioters were taking pictures of themselves and posting them.
Exactly.
We don't have that usually. Like, can you imagine like someone robbing a bank? Oh, let me take a selfie here while I'm robbing the bank. You know,
Right.
It's not
That's
the
a
usual
special
thing that happens.
That's a
Right,
special
Shivani,
type
you're
of
saying
privilege when you're committing a crime, you're filming yourself like there's going to be no consequence for you.
And that's part of why it's so important there be accountability, because clearly these individuals thought somehow they were above the law. They would be not held accountable. And we need a full accounting. So to your point, we need a full investigation, thorough, to get every single person who engaged in criminal conduct, wherever state they're from. And then to your point, if there are any police officers who end up being convicted of being there, and we know the New York Times today had a story of the people who've already been essentially charged what's their background. There were a couple police officers, not from Colorado, but under our system, the Peace Officer Standards Training Program, if you're convicted of a crime like, destroying government property or hurting someone, you'll be decertified as a police officer.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Through the post-certification that runs through your office, if a qualification of post-certification is to mean that you're not a part of any attempted coup or any type of insurrection, I don't know if that gives grounds for you all to push for these officers' tracking history to be accessed.
Well, so here's the other side, and this is where the rule of law is important.
Okay.
We have a presumption of innocence, and we have a lot of trails that we're going down, investigating who was there. I wouldn't want to just start profiling certain people, investigating them just because they're police officers or just because they're African Americans or belong to this group. That's an important principle that I want us to honor. And so we need to follow all the leads we can, hold everybody accountable, and then there needs to be consequences, including if they're police officers, to be decertified, assuming they're in a state like Colorado. Colorado, we've got a good post system. If people are adjudicated of committing crimes, they get decertified. We've got regular post meetings, and we do that. And usually the individuals don't contest it if they recognize that what they did was wrong. So when we had those 6 people we decertified for untruthfulness, we gave them a chance to be heard. I believe in due process. It's a fundamental principle, but they didn't contest it. They recognized they had lost their right to be police officers.
Okay. I feel I got a quick question. If you were a criminal defendant, would you want to know if one of the police officers involved in your case was part of a group that supported insurrection? And 2, would you want to know if a juror or a potential juror was part of a group or an organization that supported insurrection?
So we are in a very delicate territory here. I just want to remind people what made the McCarthy era so dangerous was people were profiled based on their ideological views. And there were all sorts of consequences in Hollywood and other places. And so I know there are people who have signed up for groups that are trafficking in hate and dangerous rhetoric. I want us to be really careful before we start painting with a broad brush and making categorical judgments because someone might have signed up for or belonged to a certain group. Now, anyone who is there at the Capitol committing a crime, that's a different situation. But if you're in some group of people, and it could be all sorts of kinds of groups, I want us to be careful before we move from that to some other consequence.
I got you. But, maybe that might be a roundabout way to help them live just the inkling of the Black experience.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
I mean, I don't want to be profiled. Yeah.
I'm Black.
So,
well, I will say this is actually, let me come back to the Jewish Black thing again. I have to come out as Jewish for someone to know that I'm Jewish. And I've come out. If you're gay, you've got to come out as gay. And then even a number of people who are Latinos, you're not always exactly sure. But if you're Black, you don't have to come out. You show up and people know you're Black.
Right.
Just wait till the lasers come out. Lasers?
Hey,
I'm telling you.
That means it should be easy to miss.
I want to combine 2 questions from Facebook. Looks like Leanne and what's his name?
Demetrius.
Both were talking about Prop 111 and also just equity when it comes to predatory lending and just predatory practices in all the lending going on here. Now, we've already passed legislation. How is this persisting, and what's our plan moving forward to protect the community?
Thank you. For those who are not aware of it, we have a cap, 36%. You're not allowed to lend over that. And that's by the way, that's a lot of interest to be charging. Yes. But before that passed, with close to 80% of the support of the public, there was all sorts of huge, 100%. And it was, the payday lending. What is a concern is there are other ways people have been trying to get around that. And so our office is on that, looking for how we shut it down. Unfortunately, this is sometimes what happens. You get loopholes that people discover and they try to take advantage of, and they prey on people. So we've had some enforcement actions in our office about one effort to get around it. It was by out-of-state banks, and that was a action that protected this integrity of our system. But unfortunately, this is a little bit of, we got to stay vigilant on it, and we got to keep working it. So thank you, Leanne, for your leadership and vigilance. The preying on people who are vulnerable is kind of the worst of the worst. People who take advantage of vulnerable people to make a profit. We took action today, by the way, so I got to promote this, against McKinsey, who was aiding, abetting the pushing, the turbocharging of opioids, getting more people hooked. And that sort of conduct, which in this case, they're working with Purdue Pharma, is reprehensible. The people who would make money on these predatory loans, it's reprehensible. I don't have anything against people making money, but make it by making a good product that people want and charging a fair price and treat your workers well. There are companies out there that can do that, and there are a whole bunch of actors out there doing things like predatory lending too.
Yeah, it can be done without weaponizing addiction and whatnot, right?
Amen.
So I happen to have a little inside information on the attempts by Bell Policy Center and another strong Black woman in the Aurora community, Kat Traylor, to open up an Office of Financial Empowerment. I'm rooting for her. I'm working hard with it, and I know that you're supporting this measure. What can we be looking forward to with that work?
I appreciate you mentioning Kat and her work. What people can appreciate is the following. If you grow up in a privileged background where you're taught all sorts of financial literacy and you get a credit card when you're growing up and you've got a good credit rating, you are in a totally different world than someone who grows up without anything, who doesn't learn those basic financial literacy skills, and who ends up in what we call the unbanked, and who cashes checks at places that take a huge chunk out of the check because the individual has never gotten a bank account, gotten a path where their credit history gives them opportunities. So what we need and what Kat's working on is financial empowerment. How can we help those who otherwise might never develop these life skills and start building those muscles and skills? And so I know that we have a couple of school board members here. So we're talking about opportunities that you're probably looking at in Aurora. And we need to think about, can we, particularly for those kids who maybe have families that don't know how to have this conversation, can we find ways to introduce financial empowerment at the local level? And this bill would help create that office to create a network around the whole state. That would be local governments, it would be schools, and we would start developing competitions to make it fun. We'd start developing curriculum. We'd start providing support centers so that we can give people a chance. If you have a time to listen to a podcast, there's a good one by Michael Lewis called Against the Rules. Season 2 talks about coaches. And one of the episodes talked about what it makes a difference to have a financial coach for people. And when there's this one woman whose profile, she's a teacher, she's working hard, she's got tons of student loan debt, and she's gritting her teeth every night because of all the stress she's carrying around from all her debt. And she gets some coaching that helps really turn around her financial situation. That's what I wish for everybody.
And just to piggyback on the curriculum portion of it, just being 2 members of the school board, I happen to be on the high school math task force, and we have some curriculum around financial literacy. It's called financial algebra, but it's limited, and that's not necessarily on their track for advanced degrees. So they kind of have to choose between the real world classes that actually address these sorts of things, or will I be able to take engineering as a freshman at university? So we're trying to do something about that balance as we speak.
You like to hear this, Kevin. When I had a settlement against the company charging more than the interest rate, one of the requirements is they kick in money to support a group called Money Weiser that does financial literacy for high school students.
Very nice.
To
Very
be
nice.
fair, Money Weiser, W-I-S-E-R. No relation to Phil Weiser, E-I-S-E-R.
Right. So just been following some of the questions here as well. And so just to go back to your Prop 111 real quickly, I think you probably see it in the chat. Leanne Wheeler has said that she was more so interested in the, I guess, the inevitable uptick in all the predatory lending post-COVID. Just your thoughts on that, and then we're gonna switch it up on you once again. Keep you on your toes.
All right, I like that. Part of what's painful about COVID is the rich have gotten richer. Jeff Bezos has made more money. And poor people have been more preyed on, more apt to get the virus, more apt to face potential eviction or face issues around hunger and food insecurity. And it is a scary time. Part of why we need federal relief that hopefully Congress will be able to actually govern and address this major challenge in front of it. What I would say is, like a lot of things, there are those out there preying on people who are vulnerable during this time. And so here's my pitch for people. When you hear things happening like predatory lending, we need to hear from you. I often say our democracy is a team sport. It's not a spectator sport. You hear about something bad happening, let us know. Here's where you go. StopFraudColorado.gov. StopFraudColorado.gov. And you report, hey, I know this guy who's lending at 50%. Isn't that against the law? We want to know about it so we can do something about it.
Wait, give that website again. I'm gonna put it.
Stop fraud, Colorado.gov.
All right, I just put it in the Facebook chat. So,
And it looks like we're getting close. What's our last one?
go.
Marcus?
In terms of questions, we got some good folks that are coming or that are asking questions. So, you got one who's talking about, and I think you see it in the chat, the homelessness aspect of it and the cost of calculating that. I guess my question to you is that something that you all would be following, I suppose. And then you got someone else talking about, Kenneth Gallegos talking about this current round of funding. I think he's talking about the PPP loan. I'm not quite sure with respect to targeting minority businesses. What's your two thoughts on those?
Yeah,
Just quickly,
let me
since Billy
first
got
one,
paid and
homelessness
stuff.
is really a local issue. So we don't have a lot of connection to it. So I'm not familiar with the underlying issue here or what could be done differently. The issue around access to credit, and particularly for poor and women and minority-owned businesses, I would say, this gets back to what I was talking about earlier. It's an equity issue. The people who are well-connected and have gotten PPP loans are in better shape than those who may not know how to work the system. So here's what I want people to know. If you are a small business trying to navigate during this time when you are literally facing the question, can you stay in business? We want you to get the resources you need. So we work together, our office, with the Colorado Lawyers Committee on a project to provide volunteer legal representation for businesses who are hurting during this time and need access to credit, need to renegotiate a lease, whatever your needs are as a business. We set up this network of lawyers who want to volunteer to help you.
Nice.
Wow, okay.
And how do they access that?
Colorado Lawyers Committee.
Okay.
I'll get the right exact thing in a minute for you. Keep going.
Okay. Keep talking.
Another
Yeah,
question.
keep talking. I can do. I can.
No dead space. That's good. That's nice that that is out there for the small businesses, especially during COVID. A lot of businesses tried to stay open, struggled. We're going through our neighborhoods now in our communities, and we're seeing a lot of closed doors and lights out. So helping those small businesses stay alive and keep their businesses open is vital right now.
So I do have a question or a comment while you're looking at that, Phil. If I understand homelessness is a local thing, but with the federal courts, and there have been some rulings on how Denver is messing up and doing some type of civil rights violations, would that then become a state issue where the unhoused person can bring it to the AG's office to have a suit placed against Denver, or for their civil rights violation for like the ignoring of the federal order?
Can you base it?
So we, I put it in the chat, but it's the Zoom chat, the recent article. So if Marcus or someone can put it on Facebook.
I'll do it.
So the issue is still one of the city of Denver being sued by those who are having civil rights and issues and concerns that they've been violated. We are rarely directly involved. We do represent the Civil Rights Commission, but I don't know if the issues are the ones that they have authority over. And so in general, we're not involved with local governments when there's civil rights issues. It's local government or any body that governs them that works it out. And so as a result, I know there's ongoing litigation about how they're handling the issue, but it's not really been part of my portfolio. Oh, what's going on here? This is the article we're sharing now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is 5280. They did a profile on what we put together, which is this statewide coalition helping small businesses with legal needs. And if you go down further, they'll have the information. It's the Colorado COVID Legal Relief. And there it is. Just hit that. And that gets you to a website that people can get access to the resources they need. And this is, to my mind, what Colorado is all about. It's about working together to solve problems, whether it's helping small businesses during the pandemic, whether it's working on a better reentry program, whether it's addressing these issues in the school to prison pipeline. We're getting ready to put out a report in their office on it. We've got a lot of work to do to pursue justice and to defend the concept of equal justice under law.
All right.
We're putting that in the Facebook chat as well. Sorry, we were on mute. Well, look, Phil, this has been an excellent episode. You're a wealth of information, and all these questions from the viewers, everybody on Facebook family, we appreciate y'all for engaging with us. And look at this. This is a corridor to your government right here. Never thought you would have had a conversation with Phil Weiser via Dope Black Thoughts. And speaking of Dope Black Thoughts, we don't like to close out our episodes without at least a few of us giving a few of their own individual Dope Black Thoughts to finish us out. Hashim, I think you got one first, huh?
Sure, yeah. So my Dope Black Thought is, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we always have to understand that who has been the largest benefactor of diversity and affirmative actions. Oftentimes diversity is not just things on the surface level, or it's more on the surface level, or it has to be thought about in nuance as well. White women have been the largest benefactors of affirmative action, but often they are the go-to when someone wants to fill a diversity hole. So we understand that they have been the main supporters of white male privilege and white supremacy outside of white men. We have to understand diversity to be, it has to respond to racism how it was created with the same type of force. That's my Dope Black Thought.
Okay.
Mr. Carter.
Oh.
So Phil, you get some examples. So if you got one, we want to hear it.
I'll give mine is, you got to be real. If people can't listen to one another, if we can't have the empathy, then we're going to remain stuck.
I like that.
Simply put.
I like that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, my only thing was more of a, I guess, thought would be, I know you were the dean of the University of Colorado Law School, and I know, and speaking to you, I know that one of the things you were trying was making the University of Colorado more diverse, especially the law school. If once you became the AG, knowing that you had to start all over, start from scratch, You didn't have to do the same thing at the law school. Like, how do we deal with structural, not racism, but pushback on change?
I love that question. And this is a thought that not everybody probably has entertained, but try this. The two political parties are not Democrats and Republicans. It's inertia and innovation.
Nice. Nice.
Most of government is inertia, doing what government has always done. And a lot of Democrats get stuck in inertia because they don't have the passion for change that Mike's talking about. And so part of what you need is a commitment to be a change agent and to say, I'm not here to just have a title and go to meetings and do what we churn. I'm here to get things done. I'm here to drive change and to use this platform, like Stefani's called me on to use, for good purposes. And that's something that I need to keep top of my mind. And I think part of that has got to be diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let me end on a different note. And this is something we all can do. We just finished National Mentoring Month right before Black History Month. And those two actually need to go together because great leaders have great mentors. And we all need to ask, and I know you guys all do this, I know Hashim does a lot of this, how we mentor other people, helping them be their best authentic self, how they can do better. Anyone who got to where they are, I am certainly in this, has had mentors who've helped them find their way. And so one of the great things about the platform I have now is the ability to mentor people. If there are people out there who want to think about an internship in our office, high school students, college students, get in touch with Hashim. He'll nudge me and we'll work on mentoring you, because we don't have enough diversity in the legal profession. And part of our diversity and equity inclusion has got to start from building that pipeline. There's a couple programs we're working with, by the way, the Boulay Scholars and Law School Yes We Can, to really change, to whatever way we can, the trajectory for people who might not have thought about being a lawyer, because being a lawyer gives you a privilege. Mike knows this, you know, Marcus knows this. It is a title, it is a training that makes a difference. It's why Hashim's going to go to law school someday. It gives you a special benefit. We want to be we want to be able to support those lawyers of the future who we need. And that's part of how our office can make a difference and change.
All right.
I have a dope black thought. And it's not a thought. It's just, well, it is. You have to unlearn the learned. And so I know that I'm in a room right now with a lot of very intelligent men who you've learned your craft, you research, and you're in a field that you constantly have to continue to learn and grow and mold and change. Real quick, Phil, what's the last book you read that had nothing to do with politics?
The Midnight Library.
I would encourage you to read. You don't have to be a racist to think that you have some sort of superiority over minorities. You don't have to be a racist to know that and to think that. I would encourage you to read 2 books, The New Jim Crow and Caste.
Got them both.
Very important. Yeah.
I've read The New Jim Crow. I'm working on Caste right now.
Cool. Me too. So those are books that I think a lot of people should read. There's some behavior that has to be unlearned, and until that happens, there's be very little change, because it's a mentality issue.
And
go ahead.
Not to promote any specific business, Target has Caste on sale right now for $19.99.
Did you get it?
Just Mercy would be my third one on that. Just Mercy, and there's a movie to watch as well.
I did see that. We did see that. Yeah.
All right, well, those are some dope Black thoughts. And Attorney General Phil Weiser, thank you so much for gracing our airwaves. Thank you, everybody in the Facebook family. Please ask you to stay on after the outro so we have a word. Thank you, everybody. Y'all have a great day. Peace. Peace.
Still live. Oh.
We have an outtake now. I love it.
Well, we're still live, I think.
We're muted.
Oh, we're muted? We're muted. Okay.
We're muted? Okay.
We better be.
Oh, look, I love it.
Yeah. Who's Marcus I?
Closing thoughts.
Awesome. Awesome.
What is love? It's a drug. Let it rotate, didn't get back in it. Calling me an Uber just to get back to you. The gas shot like fake, I send it. Is it really worth the wait? I don't get it. If I didn't gravitate, taste that wet emoji got me higher out of space.